The steady beep of the heart monitor pulled me into consciousness. I opened my eyes to the sterile white ceiling of Tokyo General Hospital, feeling the stiffness in my neck as I tried to turn my head. My body ached everywhere, a dull throb pulsing behind my temples. Ren sat slumped in a chair beside my bed, his head drooping forward in sleep. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, his usually perfectly styled hair disheveled. My boyfriend of 1 year looked genuinely worried. I remembered everything. The thunderstorm, the texts I'd found on his phone, running away across Sakura Bridge, headlights appearing suddenly through the rain. Then nothing. 3 days had apparently passed since then, according to the date on the wall calendar. 3 days since I'd discovered messages between Ren and someone named Nana, messages that left no doubt they were seeing each other behind my back. As Ren stirred, I made my decision in an instant. I kept my expression blank, confused. When his eyes met mine, I manufactured a perfect look of non-recognition. "You're awake!" He bolted upright, relief flooding his face. "Yui, how are you feeling?" I blinked slowly, deliberately. Where am I?" "You're in the hospital. You were in an accident." His hand reached for mine and I let him take it, though every cell in my body wanted to pull away. "Do you remember anything?" I shook my head slightly, then winced at the genuine pain the movement caused. "Do you know who I am?" His voice trembled, and I noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped the bed rail. I stared at him for a long moment, making him squirm under my gaze. "No," I lied. "Should I?" The color drained from his face. He hit the call button frantically, and within moments a doctor appeared. "She's awake, but she doesn't recognize me," Ren explained, panic edging his voice. Dr. Mizuno, according to her name tag, shined a penlight in my eyes. "Yui-san, do you know where you are?" "A hospital," I said softly, "but I don't remember coming here." She performed a series of cognitive tests, asking me to follow her finger with my eyes, checking my reflexes. I answered some general knowledge questions correctly but pretended confusion about personal details. "Memory loss can be a side effect of concussion," she explained to Ren, who hovered anxiously at the foot of my bed. "Usually temporary, but there's no way to predict how long it might last. Familiar environments, photos, music, these things might help trigger memories." Ren nodded, looking both devastated and, was that relief? I cataloged his reaction, storing it away as evidence. "I'll come back to check on you soon," Dr. Mizuno told me with a reassuring smile before leaving us alone. The game had begun. Over the next 2 days, Ren hardly left my side. He brought photo albums, showed me pictures on his phone, and recounted stories of our relationship with a desperate enthusiasm that felt forced. I watched him carefully, noting how he'd check his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, the way his eyes darted nervously when I asked about certain things. "What was I doing before the accident?" I asked as he flipped through photos of us at a festival last summer. His hands froze momentarily. "You were heading home from the university. It was raining hard." A lie. I'd been running away from him after finding those texts. Did he think I'd been hit before I could confront him? Was that why he seemed both concerned and relieved? "You kept paintings in your apartment," he continued quickly, changing the subject. "Beautiful ones. You're studying fine arts at Meiji University." I nodded as if trying to absorb this information, while silently noting how he'd diverted the conversation. When he stepped out to get coffee, I reached for my own phone, which sat charging on the bedside table. I scrolled through my text history, finding the exchange that had shattered everything 3 days ago. "Ren, can't tonight. With Yui. Nana. Again? It's been almost a week." Ren, "I know. Tomorrow, I promise. The usual place." Nana, "You better make it worth the wait." Ren, "Don't I always?" There were dozens more exchanges just like it. I discovered them by accident when Ren had asked me to check a message while he was driving. One notification had led to another, and another, until I'd found 6 months of betrayal documented in plain text. I heard his footsteps approaching and quickly locked the phone, resuming my vacant expression. "They had your favorite milk tea in the cafeteria," he said, setting a cup on my tray. I looked at it blankly. "Is this my favorite?" "Yes," he replied, watching me carefully. "You always order it when we go to that cafe near campus." I took a small sip and forced a smile. "It's good." On the 3rd day of my charade, my friend May appeared in the doorway, her purple-tipped hair making her instantly recognizable. Her eyes widened at my bandaged state. "Yui!" God, you look terrible, she blurted, then covered her mouth. Sorry, Ren only told me yesterday and he said it wasn't that bad. I stared at her with rehearsed confusion, though I desperately wanted to talk to her alone. Ren quickly stepped between us. May, remember what I said? She doesn't remember people right now. May's gaze sharpened. Amnesia? Seriously? The doctor said it's temporary, Ren explained, placing his hand possessively on my shoulder. Right, May said, her tone skeptical. She tried to move closer to my bed, but Ren barely yielded space. I'm May, she said directly to me. We've been friends since high school. I've got photos of us on painting trips if you want to see. Maybe another time, Ren interrupted. The doctor said not to overwhelm her with too many visitors or information. May's eyes narrowed slightly. Sure, whatever's best for you. She turned to me. I'll come back soon, okay? When you're feeling better. I nodded, maintaining my blank expression, though I wanted to scream for her to stay. She needs rest, Ren said, already ushering her toward the door. I'll be back, May promised, giving Ren a look that could have frozen water. After she left, Ren became even more attentive, almost smothering. He continued his stories about our relationship, but I noticed he edited as he went. Nothing about fights or disagreements. Nothing about the nights he claimed to be studying but wasn't answering my texts. A sanitized version of our history. That night, I pretended to fall asleep early. Through barely opened eyes, I watched Ren check my breathing, then pull out his phone. His thumbs moved quickly across the screen, his face illuminated in the dim room. I couldn't see what he was typing, but his expression shifted between concern and calculation. The phone in his hand buzzed quietly, and he turned away to read the response. I heard him whisper, though I couldn't make out all the words. Doesn't remember anything. Need more time. I'm handling it. My chest tightened, but I kept my breathing steady, feigning sleep. Who was he talking to? Nana? Someone else covering for him? On the 5th day, Dr. Mizuno declared me well enough to be discharged. The concussion is healing well, but you'll need to take it easy for at least 2 weeks, she explained while checking my reflexes one final time. No strenuous activity, limit screen time, and come back immediately if you experience increased headaches, dizziness, or confusion. Will her memory return? Ren asked, clutching a folder of discharge papers. In most cases, yes, but the timeline varies. Continue with familiar routines, surroundings, and activities. Don't force it. Memories often return on their own. I nodded meekly, playing my part perfectly. As Ren helped me into a wheelchair, hospital policy for discharge, I caught Dr. Mizuno watching me with a slightly furrowed brow. I wondered if my performance had slipped somehow, but she simply smiled professionally and wished me well. In the taxi heading to my apartment, I gazed out the window at Tokyo passing by, the familiar cityscape I was supposed to be seeing as if for the first time. My body had begun healing, the cuts and bruises fading, the headaches less intense, but the pain of betrayal felt as fresh as the moment I'd seen those texts. Ren placed his hand over mine on the seat between us. I didn't pull away, though I wanted to. Instead, I stared at our joined hands as if trying to remember what they meant to me. I had made my choice. This charade was my only path forward. The only way to discover the full extent of Ren's deception without giving him the chance to manufacture more lies. I would play the amnesiac girlfriend until I had all the answers I needed. The taxi pulled up outside my building. As Ren helped me out, carrying my small bag of belongings from the hospital, I looked up at the apartment windows with manufactured wonder, steeling myself for the performance ahead. The apartment key felt cool against my palm as Ren guided my hand to the lock. I turned it with deliberate uncertainty, playing the part of someone entering a forgotten home. Here we are, Ren announced, sweeping his arm in a grand gesture as the door swung open. Your place. I stepped inside, letting my eyes drift across the familiar space while maintaining a facade of cautious curiosity. The small living room with its worn beige couch, the kitchenette with mismatched mugs hanging on hooks, my easel by the window, exactly where I'd left it the night I discovered those texts. Anything feel familiar? Ren asked, his voice pitched with that forced optimism I was growing to hate. I shook my head slowly. Not really. I lived here alone? We both lived here until about 6 months ago. I moved closer to campus to be near the library for late-night study sessions. His hand rested on my lower back, steering me further inside, but I stayed over most nights anyway. Another lie. He'd moved out because I needed space to work on my art projects, and he claimed the smell of paint gave him headaches. The study session's explanation was new. "It's nice," I offered, moving toward the bookshelf lined with art books and novels. My collection carefully arranged by color rather than author, a detail he never noticed. Ren bustled around opening curtains and straightening cushions like a realtor staging a property. The doctor said familiar surroundings might help trigger memories. "I'll stay with you the first few nights. Make sure you're settled." My stomach tightened, but I nodded with feigned appreciation. "Thank you." He pulled out his phone, frowning at the screen before quickly pocketing it. "Let me get your bag unpacked." Over the next few days, Ren established himself as my dedicated caretaker. He arranged my medications on the bathroom counter, labeled each bottle with times and dosages. He cooked simple meals, mostly takeout reheated and plated to look homemade. He slept on the couch, making a show of respecting boundaries while simultaneously invading every aspect of my recovery. By the 5th day back home, the pattern was firmly established. Mornings began with Ren bringing me tea and toast in bed, recounting another carefully curated memory of us. "Remember our first date?" he asked, perching on the edge of my mattress, his weight creating a slope that pulled me slightly toward him. "The Neko Cafe in Ikebukuro? You wore that blue dress with little white buttons." I didn't own a blue dress with white buttons. Our first date had been at an art exhibition where he'd spent most of the evening talking about himself. "It sounds nice," I murmured, sipping my tea. "You fell in love with the calico cat, wanted to take her home." He laughed too loudly. "Then when we went to Okinawa last summer, you said the beach reminded you of that cat's colors." We had gone to Okinawa, but in spring, not summer. And I'd been terrified of the cafe cats after a childhood incident he apparently didn't remember me telling him about. These fabrications and revisions continued daily. When Ren left for classes or errands, I carefully examined my own records. The journal I kept hidden behind my art history textbooks confirmed dates and events as I remembered them. Text histories showed conversations that contradicted his stories. Photos on my laptop revealed truths his selective memory albums omitted. In the quiet of my apartment, I practiced painting with my non-dominant hand, creating deliberately unsteady works that showed progress in my recovery. Each evening, I showed Ren these paintings with manufactured pride, watching how he praised my improvement while barely glancing at the canvases. 9 days after returning home, Professor Okada called. Ren answered my phone before I could reach it. "Hello? Yes, this is Yui's phone." He paced the kitchen, throwing concerned glances my way. "She's recovering, but still having memory issues. No, I don't think she can discuss that yet. Perhaps I could." I extended my hand for the phone. After a moment's hesitation, he surrendered it. "Hello? This is Yui," I said, injecting uncertainty into my voice. "Yui-san, Professor Okada here. How are you feeling?" His gruff voice carried genuine concern. "I'm better physically, still trying to remember things. Understandable, I'm calling about your final portfolio project. Given your situation, the department has approved a semester extension. No need to rush your recovery." Relief flooded through me, both at the extension and the professor's matter-of-fact tone. No pity, just practical accommodation. "Thank you, Professor. That helps a lot. Your work has always shown exceptional insight, Yui-san. I have no doubt it will again, whenever you're ready." He paused. "And if you need anything at all, my office door remains open." After thanking him again, I ended the call to find Ren watching me intently. What did he want? The question came too quickly, too sharply. An extension for my portfolio project. I set the phone down carefully. "He seems nice. He's all right? Bit of a hard-ass normally." Ren's phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it with a frown, thumbs tapping a quick response. "Work group chat. Nothing important." That night, exhausted from maintaining my charade, I fell asleep on the couch while Ren washed dishes. I wasn't fully conscious when his phone rang, but the sudden drop in his voice pulled me from the edge of sleep. "I can't talk long," he whispered, water still running to mask his voice. "No, nothing's changed. She doesn't remember anything. No, I'm sure we just need more time." I kept my breathing steady, eyes closed against the betrayal burning behind my lids. "I'll try to come by tomorrow." "Yes, the usual place." A long pause. "I miss you too." The next morning, Ren announced he had a group project meeting. "I'll only be gone a few hours. Will you be okay?" I nodded, feigning sleepy indifference. I might try sketching something. The door had barely closed behind him when a different knock came, 3 gentle taps that somehow sounded hesitant. Through the peephole, I saw Daiki shifting awkwardly, a small bunch of wildflowers clutched in his hand. I opened the door, remembering to maintain my blank expression, despite the unexpected flutter in my chest. "Hi," Daiki said, offering an uncertain smile. "I hope it's okay to visit. Ren mentioned you were feeling better." I blinked at him, playing my part. "You're Daiki, right?" Ren showed me pictures. A flash of something, disappointment maybe, crossed his face before he nodded. "That's right. We've known each other since high school." He extended the wildflowers. "These were growing near the river. Thought they might brighten up your place." Unlike the formal roses Ren had brought twice, both times announcing their cost and rarity, these were simple, imperfect, beautiful. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "Would you like to come in?" While I found a vase for the flowers, Daiki stood awkwardly in the living room, hands in his pockets. He didn't try to help or direct me, just waited patiently until I returned. "Ren said you're an artist," he offered as we sat on opposite ends of the couch. "Apparently. I have the supplies to prove it, at least." I gestured toward my easel. "You are." The simple certainty in his voice caught me off guard. "You used to sketch during lectures. Little details most people missed. The way light hit a doorknob or how someone's hands moved when they talked. This wasn't the rehearsed biography Ren recited daily. This was something small, specific, true. Did I ever draw you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. He smiled, not the bright, performed smile Ren used, but something gentler. "Once. We were at Inokashira Park. You said I needed to stop moving my hands when I talked because it was making your sketch look like I had 8 fingers. I remembered that day perfectly. It had been early autumn, leaves just beginning to turn. Daiki had been telling a story about his grandfather's fishing boat, his hands animating the waves. "Do you still have it?" I asked, curious if he'd kept the sketch. In my literature textbook, I use it as a bookmark. Our conversation continued naturally without the forced reminiscing that characterized Ren's visits. Daiki didn't try to trigger my memories or quiz me about past events. Instead, he talked about current exhibitions at the University Gallery, a new noodle shop near campus, the changing leaves in Yoyogi Park. When he mentioned a film showing at the independent theater we'd attended together twice, information Ren had never included in his relationship history, I carefully kept my recognition hidden. Before leaving, Daiki paused at the door. "I don't want to overstay. Ren mentioned he's been helping with your recovery, and I don't want to interfere." "You're not," I said too quickly. "It's nice. Talking to someone who doesn't look at me like I'm broken." His eyes met mine, holding for a moment too long. "You're not broken, Yui. Just healing." After he left, I stood staring at the wildflowers, their imperfect beauty somehow more honest than anything in my apartment right now, including me. As the second week of my recovery progressed, both Ren and Daiki established visiting patterns. Ren came daily, always with some memory prop. Photo albums, movie tickets saved from dates, the scarf he claimed I'd left at his apartment. His stories grew increasingly elaborate, timelines shifting to cover the hours I now suspected he spent with Nana. "Remember when we took that overnight trip to the hot springs last December?" he asked, showing me pictures of a ryokan I recognized. "Was that our anniversary?" I asked innocently. His hesitation was barely perceptible. "No, just a weekend getaway. Our anniversary is in March." Another lie. We'd started dating in September, not March, and the hot springs trip had been with a group of friends in November, not a romantic December escape. Daiki visited every other day, always when Ren was at basketball practice or study group. He never brought relationship memorabilia, only small, thoughtful offerings. A library book on hokusai he thought might interest me, a pastry from the bakery near campus that had maple leaf designs for autumn, a smooth stone he'd found that resembled a painter's palette. During one visit, he helped me organize my art supplies, which had become chaotically arranged on my work table. While sorting brushes, his fingers brushed against mine, a touch that lingered for just a heartbeat before we both pulled away. The moment hung between us, unacknowledged but undeniably present. Ren began checking in more frequently when he wasn't visiting, his texts appearing with increasing urgency. "How are you feeling? Did you take your medication? Has anyone stopped by? What are you doing right now?" The questions felt less like concern and more like surveillance. When I mentioned casually that Daiki had visited, Ren's reaction was immediate and poorly concealed. Daiki came here? Alone? His fingers tightened around his coffee mug. What did he want? Just to visit? He brought wildflowers. I kept my tone neutral, watching Ren's knuckles whiten. You should tell me when people are coming over. You're still recovering. Do I need permission for visitors? I asked, allowing a hint of challenge to enter my voice. Ren backpedaled instantly. Of course not. I just worry. You're vulnerable right now. That evening I heard him on the phone again, this time in the hallway outside my bathroom while I showered. She mentioned Daiki visiting. No, I don't think he knows anything. I'll handle it. As the 2-week mark approached, the differences between my 2 regular visitors became increasingly stark. Ren moved through my apartment with entitled familiarity, rearranging things without asking, answering my phone, checking my medication. His presence filled the space with nervous energy and performative affection. Daiki sat quietly, listening more than speaking, respecting the invisible boundaries I'd established. He never presumed to touch my belongings or direct my recovery. His presence felt like a respite rather than an invasion. The emotional contradiction twisted inside me daily. Guilt for my deception, anger at Ren's betrayal, and an unwelcome warmth whenever Daiki appeared at my door. The apartment that had once been my sanctuary now felt like a stage set for an increasingly complicated performance. On the final evening of that 2nd week, Ren arrived with a determined expression and a small, wrapped package. I found this while looking through some old things, he announced, placing the gift in my hands. I thought it might help. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a paintbrush. I recognized it immediately. He'd given it to me 3 months into our relationship, after my first university exhibition. It's beautiful, I said honestly. You used to wear it all the time. He took it from the box, fastening it around my wrist. His fingers brushed against my pulse point, lingering there. It looks right on you. As he leaned in to kiss me, I turned my head slightly, his lips landing on my cheek instead of my mouth. Frustration flickered across his face before he masked it with understanding. Too soon, right? I'm sorry. He squeezed my hand. I'm trying to be patient. It's just hard when I remember everything and you don't. The irony of his statement washed over me, bitter and cold. Pretending not to remember was exhausting, but not nearly as painful as remembering everything he'd chosen to forget or reinvent. That night, after Ren left, I stood at my window overlooking the Shibuya streets below, the bracelet heavy on my wrist. The last 2 weeks had shown me sides of Ren I'd never fully seen before. His capacity for elaborate lies, his need for control, his careful rewriting of our history. But I'd also discovered something unexpected in Daiki's visits, a connection based on simple truths and small kindnesses. It complicated everything. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window, my face unreadable even to myself. 2 weeks of pretending had changed something fundamental. The anger that had fueled my initial deception had transformed into something more complex, a determination to uncover the full truth, regardless of how much it might hurt. The bracelet caught the light as I turned my wrist. It represented a version of our relationship that might never have existed outside Ren's carefully constructed narrative. I unclasped it, returning it to its box. Tomorrow would mark 2 weeks since I'd returned home. 2 weeks of watching Ren weave stories that served his purposes. 2 weeks of calculating his absences against his explanations. 2 weeks of comparing his rehearsed affection with Daiki's quiet sincerity. I closed the curtains on the neon-lit streets below, shutting out the reflection that no longer seemed entirely my own. My charade had begun as revenge, but it had evolved into something else entirely. A journey toward a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I clutched my sketchbook to my chest, fingertips pressing into the leather binding as I stood at the entrance to Meiji University's main quad. Students rushed past in waves, laughing and calling to each other. The familiar energy should have felt comforting. Instead, each step forward felt like walking into a theater for a performance I hadn't fully rehearsed. You okay? Ren squeezed my elbow, his grip slightly too tight. We can come back tomorrow if it's overwhelming. I'm fine. I inhaled deeply, letting my gaze drift across the quad with manufactured uncertainty. Just taking it all in. 1 month had passed since the accident. 4 weeks of playing a role that was beginning to feel like a second skin. 4 weeks of watching Ren construct elaborate fictions about our relationship, while I collected each inconsistency like evidence at a crime scene. Let me carry that. Ren reached for my sketchbook. I turned slightly, keeping it pressed against me. I've got it, I said, forcing a smile. The physical therapist said I should practice normal movements. His jaw tightened momentarily before he nodded. Right, of course. We made our way across campus, Ren narrating as if I'd never been here before. The library's in that building. You used to spend hours in the third-floor art section. And over there is where we first met, remember? You were sitting under that tree. Another lie. We'd met at a party in Shibuya, introduced by mutual friends. The tree he pointed to was where I'd once caught him in an intense conversation with a girl he'd claimed was his cousin. I wondered now if it had been Nana. Professor Okada's figure appeared at the top of the stone steps leading to the art building, his eyes lit with recognition. Hamasaki-san, welcome back. He descended, clipboard tucked under his arm. Thank you, Professor. I maintained my hesitant tone. I'm still getting reoriented. Ren stepped forward, placing his hand on my lower back. Yui's doctor approved her return, but she's still recovering her memories. We're taking it day by day. Professor Okada's eyes flickered between us, lingering on Ren's possessive gesture. I see. Well, Hamasaki-san, your workspace in Studio C remains as you left it. Take whatever time you need. I'll be accompanying her to classes, Ren added, to help explain her condition. That won't be necessary in my studio sessions, Professor Okada replied firmly. Art requires personal space for expression. I'm sure you understand. Before Ren could argue, another professor called him from across the quad. He hesitated, then squeezed my shoulder. I'll just be a minute, he said. Wait here. As soon as Ren moved away, Professor Okada's posture relaxed. Genuine artistic talent doesn't require memory, Hamasaki-san. The hands remember what the mind creates. He tapped his clipboard. I've seen your hospital sketches. Your technical skill remains interestingly intact. My pulse quickened. Had he noticed the discrepancy between my supposed condition and my artwork? Is that unusual? I asked carefully. Let's just say I look forward to seeing your progress. He glanced toward Ren, who was deep in conversation across the quad. The studio is open until 9 tonight if you find yourself needing solitude? He nodded briefly and continued up the steps, leaving me with the distinct impression he'd offered more than just studio access. Ren returned, checking his phone too casually. Sorry about that. Professor Yamamoto needed clarification on my thesis deadline. He tucked his phone away quickly when he noticed me watching. Hungry? We've got an hour before your first class. The cafeteria buzzed with lunchtime activity. I let Ren guide me through the line, nodding as he pointed out what he claimed were my favorites. When he placed a bowl of miso ramen before me, I hesitated. I'd never particularly liked ramen, preferring udon, something he should have known after a year of dating. Is something wrong? He asked, watching me closely. No, it looks good. I picked up my chopsticks, playing my part. We found a table near the windows. Ren spent more time watching me eat than touching his own food, explaining campus landmarks, visible through the glass, as if reciting from a university brochure. I was midway through, forcing down noodles I didn't want, when Ren's posture suddenly stiffened. His eyes fixed on something behind me, and his face drained of color. Actually, let's sit somewhere else, he suggested, already half-standing. The sun's too bright here. Before I could respond, a smooth female voice spoke from behind me. Katagiri-kun, what a surprise seeing you here at this hour. Don't you usually have economic theory now? I turned to see a tall, elegant woman with perfectly straight black hair falling past her shoulders. Everything about her, from her minimalist black dress to her subtle designer watch, spoke of calculated sophistication. Ren remained frozen, chopsticks suspended midair. Nana, I'm helping Yui readjust to campus. Her eyes shifted to me, curiosity barely masked by politeness. The girlfriend. I've heard about your condition. The slight pause before condition carried a weight I couldn't quite interpret. Yui, this is Shimizu Nana, Ren said too quickly. She's a graduate student in literature. We've been in a study group together. Nana's eyebrow lifted fractionally. Study group. Is that what we're calling it now? She placed her hand on Ren's arm, her red-tipped fingers lingering longer than casual acquaintance would warrant. I watched his throat bob as he swallowed hard. Actually, We've partnered on some cross-departmental research, Ren clarified, easing his arm from her touch. Economic influences on modern literature. How fascinating, I murmured, noting how Nana's gaze held mine, assessing. Truly, she agreed, her smile not reaching her eyes, though our most productive sessions rarely involve actual books. Ren's water glass tipped over as he reached for it, spreading across the table. He scrambled for napkins, his composure visibly fracturing. Clumsy as always, Nana commented, stepping back to avoid the spill. Well, I won't intrude on your recovery therapy, Hamasaki-san. I'm sure Ren is being attentive. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, Ren, we still on for tomorrow evening. The Shinagawa Research Archive's close at 8, so we should meet earlier. His eyes darted to me before answering. I'll have to check my schedule. Don't keep me waiting too long, she replied, the double meaning unmistakable. With a final assessing look at me, she glided away, her straight hair swinging like a curtain closing on a performance. Ren busied himself with napkins, sopping up water while avoiding my eyes. Sorry about that. Nana can be intense about academics. She seems to know you well, I observed, keeping my voice neutral despite the anger churning beneath my ribs. We've had a few classes together, nothing special. He gathered the wet napkins, movements jerky. Ready for your studio session? I'll walk you over. I allowed him to escort me to the art building, listening to his increasingly nervous chatter about campus traditions and department policies. At the studio door, Professor Okada intercepted us. Katagiri-san, correct? I believe Professor Yamamoto was looking for you regarding that deadline extension. Ren hesitated, glancing between the professor and me. I was planning to help Yui get settled in the studio. That won't be necessary, Professor Okada replied firmly. Studio C is Hamasaki-san's domain. Her muscle memory will serve her well there. He turned to me. Your supplies await. The dismissal was clear. After another moment's hesitation, Ren squeezed my hand. I'll pick you up when your session ends, he said, his tone making it more command than offer. Once he disappeared down the hallway, Professor Okada motioned toward the door. Your workspace is as you left it. The department provided fresh canvases for your return. I thanked him, noticing how he watched me navigate the studio with curious eyes. As soon as I entered Studio C, I exhaled fully for the first time that day. The familiar smell of turpentine and gesso wrapped around me like an old friend. Here, at least, I didn't need to pretend unfamiliarity. The studio remained empty, except for me. I ran my fingers over my workstation, the scarred wooden tabletop with its constellation of paint stains. My brushes stood in their ceramic holder, arranged by size and type, exactly as I'd left them. A blank canvas waited on the easel, pristine and accusing. I picked up a charcoal stick, testing its weight. For weeks, I'd been creating deliberately flawed work at home, maintaining the fiction of relearning skills I'd never lost. The temptation to draw normally, to let the charcoal move with the precision I'd spent years developing, pulled at my fingers. The studio door opened behind me, and I quickly adjusted my grip to appear awkward. When I turned, expecting Professor Okada, I instead found Daiki standing in the doorway, his messenger bag slung across his chest. Sorry, he said, stepping back. I didn't realize anyone was in here. It's okay. I set down the charcoal, wiping my fingers on a rag. I'm just trying to remember how this all works. Daiki entered cautiously, closing the door behind him. Professor Okada mentioned you'd be returning today. He stayed near the entrance, giving me space. How does it feel being back? I considered my answer carefully. With Ren, every response was calculated to maintain my amnesia facade. With Daiki, the temptation to speak honestly grew stronger each time we met. Familiar but strange, I finally said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Like I should know more than I do, he nodded, moving to the window rather than approaching me directly. The light in here is best around this time. You used to say it made even the most ordinary objects look worth painting. Another true detail, one Ren had never bothered to learn. I was actually looking for you, Daiki continued, his voice quieter. But I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me, with Ren bringing you to campus and everything. I don't mind, I said too quickly. It's nice seeing different perspectives. He turned from the window, his expression serious. About that, there's something you should probably know. My heart stuttered. Had he figured out my deception? During your first week in the hospital, he continued, I saw Ren at Shinsen coffee shop, the one near the East Campus gate. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral while my pulse accelerated. He was with that literature graduate student, Nana. Daiki's eyes remained steady on mine. Not just once, multiple times. They didn't look like study partners. I tightened my grip on the rag in my hand. What do you mean? They were... He seemed to choose his words carefully. Close, holding hands under the table. The kind of body language that doesn't happen overnight. Even expecting this confirmation, hearing it spoken aloud sent a wave of nausea through me. My hand trembled as I reached for my charcoal, nearly knocking over the jar of linseed oil beside it. Daiki moved forward quickly, steadying my hand and the jar simultaneously. His fingers were warm against mine, the touch brief but stabilizing. Sorry, he said, stepping back. I wasn't sure whether to tell you, but with your memory situation, it seemed wrong to let you rebuild your life on false information. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to drop my charade and tell him everything. Instead, I nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest. I turned back to my canvas, considering my next words carefully. Ren mentioned basketball practice later this week. Thursdays, I think? Daiki leaned against the wall, far enough away to be respectful but close enough that I could see his expression shift. The team doesn't practice on Thursdays, he said simply. Mondays and Wednesdays only, plus weekend games during season. Another lie to add to my growing collection. I made a small mark on the canvas, deliberately awkward. I should practice, I murmured. Relearn what my hands used to know. Daiki nodded, moving toward the door. I'll let you work, but if you want company later, I usually study in the courtyard by the magnolia tree until around 6. After he left, I stared at my canvas, no longer maintaining my pretense of relearning. With deliberate, practiced strokes, I began sketching the cafeteria scene from earlier. Nana's perfectly straight hair, her hand on Ren's arm, his panicked expression. The truth was emerging in layers, like pigment soaking through canvas. Over the next 2 weeks, a pattern emerged. Ren would escort me to morning classes, then disappear for group projects or basketball practice in the afternoons. During these absences, I found myself gravitating to Studio C, where Daiki often appeared with coffee or snacks, never questioning when my artistic technique occasionally slipped from amateur to practiced. You're improving quickly, was all he said when I accidentally rendered a perfect perspective drawing of the studio windows. I mumbled something about muscle memory, and he nodded, accepting the explanation without pressing further. Our afternoons developed a comfortable rhythm. He would read or sketch at a neighboring workstation while I painted, our conversation flowing naturally between art theories, campus happenings, and childhood memories, his authentic, mine carefully edited to maintain my facade. One rainy Tuesday, Daiki arrived with steaming cups of green tea and rain-spattered hair. The cafe was packed, he said, setting a cup beside my workspace. But I remembered you mentioned wanting to try their seasonal blend. I had mentioned it, exactly once, 3 weeks earlier. Ren had been bringing me the same milk tea for a month, despite my carefully staged comments about wanting variety. Thank you. I accepted the cup, letting my fingers warm against the ceramic. Do you think the rain will let up before evening? Forecast says no. I brought an extra umbrella. He settled into his usual chair, pulling out a literature textbook. As he opened it, a small sketch slipped from between the pages. My sketch, the one from Inokashira Park that he'd mentioned using as a bookmark. He caught it midair, tucking it back between the pages with careful precision. Our eyes met briefly, something unspoken passing between us. I looked away first, returning to my canvas with quickened pulse. Later that week, I deliberately left my sketchbook open in the studio while getting more water. Inside were drawings I'd made before the accident, precise, technical pieces showing my full skill level, alongside newer sketches with similar technique. If someone were paying attention, the comparison would raise questions about my supposed relearning process. When I returned, Daiki stood near my workstation, eyes on the open sketchbook. He moved away casually as I approached, making no comment about what he might have noticed. But that evening, as we packed up our supplies, he handed me a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. Just something I thought might be useful, he said with a shrug. Inside was a leather-bound sketchbook with thick, high-quality paper, identical to the one I'd been using before the accident, down to the manufacturer. My previous one had been a gift from Professor Okada, not something available in standard art shops. How did you find this? I asked, running my fingers over the binding. I remembered you mentioning it was your favorite. He shouldered his bag, expression neutral. The art supply store in Quinji still had a few in stock. I had never told him about my preference for this specific sketchbook. Not during my amnesia period. Only the old me, the pre-accident me, had ever discussed it with him. That night I sat at my apartment window, turning the new sketchbook over in my hands. Daiki knew. Or at least he suspected strongly enough to test me with this gift. Yet he hadn't confronted me or exposed my deception. Instead, he'd offered this silent acknowledgement, waiting for me to make the next move. The department's autumn exhibition arrived the following week, featuring select student works from each studio. Professor Okada had included 2 of my pieces, a pre-accident study of hands I'd completed last semester, and a new work showing a fractured reflection in broken glass. "Your work demonstrates an interesting evolution," he commented during installation. "The technical foundation remains consistent, while the emotional content has deepened." I mumbled something about instinctive expression, but his knowing eyes suggested he wasn't fooled by my performance. The gallery buzzed with faculty, students, and visitors on opening night. I navigated the crowd carefully, maintaining my role as the recovering amnesiac while cataloging Ren's conspicuous absence. He'd promised to arrive by 7, claiming a late study session. Near the refreshment table, I overheard 2 students from the literature department, their voices lowered but still audible over the ambient conversation. Can't believe he's actually here with her," the first said, glancing toward the entrance. "I know, especially after spending the entire summer attached at the hip with that Shimizu girl." The second sipped her wine. "Maki saw them at that hotel in Yokohama back in June, way before his girlfriend's accident. 3 months at least, according to Nana herself. She was practically bragging about it in our graduate seminar. I guess the accident complicated things. Hard to break up with someone who doesn't even remember you're dating." Their conversation shifted as they moved away, but their words had already landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through my carefully maintained composure. 3 months. June. While I'd been preparing for summer exhibitions, Ren had been in Yokohama with Nana. I gripped my water glass tighter, focusing on the cool sensation against my palm to ground myself against the rising anger. This wasn't just opportunistic cheating, it was a sustained, deliberate deception that predated my accident by months. "Hamasaki-san?" Professor Okada's voice broke through my thoughts. "Several visitors have expressed interest in your broken reflection piece. Would you mind discussing your technique?" Grateful for the distraction, I followed him to where my painting hung, surrounded by a small group of attentive listeners. As I explained my approach to capturing fractured light, deliberately simplifying my artistic vocabulary to maintain my role, I noticed Daiki across the room, his eyes finding mine with quiet understanding. Mid-explanation, a commotion at the entrance drew attention. Ren arrived, hair perfectly styled despite the light rain outside. Scanning the crowd until he spotted me, he made his way through the gathering, smiling apologetically to those he nudged past. "Sorry I'm late," he announced, loud enough for nearby conversations to pause. The study session ran long. His arm slid around my waist, the gesture performative. "How's my recovering artist doing?" Professor Okada's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Hamasaki-san was just explaining her technique. Perhaps you'd like to listen rather than interrupt." Ren's smile faltered momentarily before he recovered. "Of course, though I've had a front row seat to her amazing recovery process." He squeezed my shoulder. "It's been inspiring watching her rediscover her talent. I'd like to think my support played a small role." Several people nodded appreciatively at what appeared to be devoted boyfriend behavior. Only I felt the possessive edge in his grip, the way he positioned himself between me and the professor. "Actually," Professor Okada countered smoothly, "artistic recovery often stems from intrinsic memory rather than external influence. The hands remember what the mind creates, regardless of circumstance." The subtle challenge in his statement wasn't lost on Ren, whose arm tightened around me. "Well, I'm just glad to see her work being recognized," Ren replied, his cheerful tone strained. "Her accident was devastating for everyone who cares about her." As the conversation continued, I caught sight of Daiki observing from across the gallery, his expression carefully neutral. But when our eyes met over the heads of the crowd, I saw recognition there, not just of my situation, but of me. The real me, buried beneath layers of necessary deception. In that moment, something shifted. The weight of my charade, which had been growing heavier with each passing day, suddenly felt unbearable. Maintaining this facade wasn't just exhausting, it was preventing me from processing my own genuine anger and grief over Ren's betrayal. Later, as the exhibition wound down and guests began departing, I found myself alone briefly near my displayed works. Daiki approached, stopping at a respectful distance to examine my painting of broken reflections. "It's excellent," he said simply. "The technique is familiar." I touched the corner of the frame, tracing its edge with my fingertip. Muscle memory, apparently. "Some things can't be forgotten," he agreed, his meaning layered. "No matter how convenient forgetting might be for others." "Daiki?" I began, but Ren's voice cut through the moment. "There you are," he called, approaching with quick steps. "Ready to go? You must be tired after all this excitement." Daiki stepped back immediately, nodding a polite goodbye before disappearing into the remaining crowd. Ren watched him go, his expression darkening momentarily. "You've been spending a lot of time with him lately," he observed, voice carefully casual. "He's been helping me in the studio," I replied, matching his tone. "When you're at basketball practice." Something flickered across Ren's face, awareness of the trap perhaps, but unwillingness to acknowledge it. "That's good, just don't overdo it." He checked his phone quickly, thumb scrolling past notifications. "You're still recovering." As he guided me toward the exit, his hand pressed against my lower back, I caught Professor Okada watching us with thoughtful eyes. Beside him stood May, her purple-tipped hair unmistakable even from a distance. She raised an eyebrow in silent question when our gazes met. Outside, the night air carried the scent of rain-washed pavement and distant cigarette smoke from students gathered near the campus gate. Ren hailed a taxi, checking his phone again while we waited. "The exhibition was impressive," he said absently. "Your professors seem pleased with your progress." I nodded, watching his profile in the glow of streetlights. The familiar angles of his face now seemed like a mask, covering something I'd never truly seen before. For a month I'd been collecting evidence of his deception, cataloging every inconsistency and lie. Tonight had provided the final pieces of a puzzle I'd already solved. "Ren," I said quietly as the taxi approached, "I'd like to visit Sakura Bridge tomorrow." His head snapped toward me, eyes widening slightly. "The accident site? Why?" Dr. Mizuno suggested visiting significant places might help trigger memories. Another lie to counter his, though this one felt justified. "It seems important." He hesitated visibly. "I don't think that's necessary. We have plenty of other places with better memories." "I want to see where it happened," I insisted, my voice firmer than my amnesiac persona typically allowed. "Will you take me there? Around sunset?" The taxi pulled alongside us, its interior light illuminating Ren's conflicted expression. I could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes, weighing the risk of refusal against the suspicion it might create. "If it's really that important to you," he finally conceded as the driver rolled down his window, "we can go tomorrow evening." I smiled with deliberate gratitude. A performance within a performance. "Thank you. I think it might help me understand everything." As we slid into the taxi's back seat, I caught sight of Daiki exiting the gallery, his gaze finding our departing vehicle. Something in his expression, a mixture of concern and resolution, strengthened my determination. Tomorrow at Sakura Bridge, my month-long charade would end. The stage was set for a final confrontation with the truth. All of it, no matter how painful. The autumn breeze sent dried leaves skittering across my sketchbook. I pressed my pencil harder against the page to keep the corner from flipping up, continuing the precise line work on my drawing of Yoyogi Park's secluded eastern garden. The maple trees had turned brilliant red, their reflection vibrating in the small pond before me. I'd chosen this spot deliberately for its isolation, far enough from the main paths that few people wandered by, yet open enough that I didn't feel hidden. 6 weeks of living a lie had worn me thin, each day of pretending not to remember, of watching Ren construct elaborate fictions about our relationship while I cataloged his betrayals. It was exhausting. I'd come here to think, to prepare myself for tomorrow's confrontation at Sakura Bridge. My fingers moved automatically across the paper, capturing the contrast between light and shadow with the technical precision I'd spent years developing. No hesitation, no simulated awkwardness. Here alone, I didn't need to maintain the fiction of relearning. The sound of approaching footsteps made my muscles tense. I considered switching to my left hand, resuming my amnesiac charade, but something in me rebelled against the idea. I was tired of pretending. I continued drawing with my right hand, eyes fixed on my sketchbook as the footsteps slowed and stopped beside my bench. Thought I might find you here. Daiki stood a few feet away, hands tucked into his jacket pockets, his breath forming small clouds in the cool air. He'd mentioned this garden once, months ago, before everything fell apart, when we'd discussed places on campus to find quiet during exam week. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, not moving closer until I nodded. He settled at the opposite end of the bench, leaving a respectful distance between us. For several minutes, he didn't speak, just watched as my pencil created precise, confident strokes across the paper. "That's really good," he finally said. Not the overblown praise Ren offered without actually looking at my work, but simple acknowledgement. "The technique is exactly like your old style." I didn't respond, just kept drawing. The maple leaves, the pond's rippled surface, the stone lantern half hidden by autumn foliage. "You remember everything, don't you?" The directness of his question made my pencil stop mid-stroke. I didn't look up, didn't turn toward him, but I felt something crumble inside me, relief and anxiety flooding through the cracks in my facade. "How long have you known?" My voice came out quieter than intended. "I've suspected since the hospital." He shifted slightly, the bench creaking beneath his weight. "But I became certain that day in Studio C when you accidentally drew perfect perspective on the windows." I finally looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time without pretense or performance. His expression held no judgment, just quiet understanding. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I figured you had your reasons." He glanced away toward the pond, and it wasn't my secret to expose. I set my sketchbook aside, suddenly unable to continue the pretense of normal activity while having this conversation. My hands felt cold despite the autumn sunshine filtering through the trees. "I found texts on Ren's phone," I said, the words rushing out after being contained for so long. "The night of the accident, messages between him and Nana. They'd been seeing each other behind my back for months." Daiki's jaw tightened, but he didn't look surprised. "I ran away. It was raining. I wasn't watching where I was going." The memories washed over me, the thunder, the headlights appearing suddenly, the horrifying moment of impact. When I woke up in the hospital and saw Ren there looking so concerned, so relieved, I just decided in that moment to pretend I didn't remember anything. "Including me," Daiki said softly, not an accusation, just a statement. "Including everyone." I rubbed my hands together, trying to warm them. At first it was about revenge. I wanted to see what he would say, what lies he would tell. But then it became something else. I needed to understand the full extent of it. Daiki nodded slowly. "I noticed other things too. You still avoid pickled radish even though Ren keeps ordering it for you because he thinks you like it. You hum the same song when you're drawing. That old Utada Hikaru track you've loved since high school. The way you arrange your brushes in the studio, always by size." Each observation landed like a gentle accusation. All these small truths I thought I'd concealed, yet Daiki had seen them all. "Why didn't he notice?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Because he wasn't really looking." Daiki pulled a small paper bag from his jacket pocket and placed it between us on the bench. "Anpan, still your favorite, right?" The simple gesture, remembering I preferred the red bean pastry over the custard ones Ren always bought, made my throat tighten. I took the offering, breaking it in half and returning a portion to him. "Yui, there's something I need to tell you." Daiki accepted the pastry but didn't eat it. "I saw Ren with Nana months ago, before your accident." My fingers froze around the anpan. "How long?" "I first noticed them together in April, at that coffee shop near Shibuya Station. They weren't exactly hiding it." He looked down at the half pastry in his hands. "I should have told you then, but you thought I wouldn't believe you," I finished for him. He nodded, regret evident in his expression. Ren and I had already started growing apart because of the way he treated you. The little lies, the canceled plans. When I confronted him about Nana, he denied everything, said I was jealous and trying to sabotage your relationship. The pastry turned to dust in my mouth. April. That was 6 months ago. While I'd been working overtime on my spring portfolio, while I'd been planning our summer trip to Okinawa, Ren had been building a separate life with someone else. There's more, Daiki continued reluctantly. He manipulated our mutual friends to cover for him, told Takashi and Kenji to say he was with them if you ever asked, created group chats that excluded you where he'd coordinate his stories. Each revelation landed like a physical blow. The magnitude of Ren's deception extended far beyond what I'd imagined. It wasn't just an affair, it was an elaborate construct designed to maintain both relationships simultaneously. And our friends had been complicit, even if unaware of the full picture. I stopped hanging out with them after I found out, Daiki added. Couldn't stomach being part of it even indirectly. I thought back to the months before my accident, how Daiki had gradually disappeared from our social gatherings. I'd assumed he was just busy with his literature studies. Now I understood he'd been distancing himself from Ren's web of lies. Thank you, I said finally, for not being part of it, for seeing me, really seeing me, both before and after. The sun had begun its descent toward the horizon, casting longer shadows across the garden. I checked my phone, no messages from Ren. He thought I was at a physical therapy appointment that didn't actually exist. The hospital had cleared me weeks ago, but I'd maintained the fiction of ongoing recovery sessions to carve out time away from his surveillance. What will you do now? Daiki asked. End it, all of it. I closed my sketchbook, tucking my pencil into the spiral binding. I've asked Ren to meet me at Sakura Bridge tomorrow evening, the place where it all fell apart, where I finally saw the truth about us. Daiki nodded, understanding the symmetry of my choice. Do you want someone there? Not interfering, just nearby? Before I could answer, the sound of hurried footsteps approached from the garden path. There you are. I've been texting you for an hour. May appeared, slightly breathless, her purple-tipped hair tucked under a knit cap. She stopped abruptly when she saw us sitting together. Oh, am I interrupting something? It's fine, I said automatically. I was just… Wait. May moved closer, studying my face with narrowed eyes. Something's different. She glanced at the sketchbook in my lap, then back to my expression. Holy shit. You're you again, aren't you? The bluntness of her assessment made me laugh despite everything. Classic May. Cutting straight to the heart of things without preamble. Yeah, I admitted. I am. Since when? She dropped onto the bench beside me, forcing Daiki to scoot further away. Since always, I confessed. I never actually lost my memory. May's eyebrows shot up. You've been faking for 6 weeks? Damn, girl. She punched my arm lightly. I'd be impressed if I wasn't so pissed you didn't tell me. I'm sorry. I couldn't tell anyone. I rubbed my arm where she'd hit me. I needed to understand what happened, what was still happening. May turned to Daiki. And you? How long have you known? He just confronted me about it, I answered for him. Apparently I'm not as good an actress as I thought. Oh, you were good, May countered. I had no idea, but I did notice Ren was way too invested in controlling your recovery. And the stories he told about your relationship? Total revisionist history. We spent the next hour filling May in on everything. The texts I'd discovered before the accident, my split-second decision in the hospital, the inconsistencies in Ren's stories, Daiki's knowledge of the affair, and my plan to confront Ren at Sakura Bridge. As the garden grew dimmer with approaching evening, May leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Look, if you're doing this tomorrow, we need a plan. Ren's manipulative as hell, and he'll try to twist this around somehow. I just want to tell him I know everything and then walk away, I said. You deserve more than that, May insisted. You deserve for him to admit what he did. All of it, without wiggling out of it. What do you suggest? Daiki asked. May's plan was simple but effective. I would meet Ren alone as arranged, but May would be nearby with evidence, screenshots of his conversations with the guys about covering for him, photos Daiki had of him with Nana from before the accident. If he tried to deny anything, she would step in with proof. And after? Daiki asked quietly. After, I want to move forward, I said. Finish my portfolio, focus on graduation, stop living in this weird limbo of pretending to be someone recovering her past while actually being trapped in it. The garden had grown dark enough that the small solar lights along the path had activated, casting gentle illumination across the pond. We needed to leave soon. The park would close at sunset, but I found myself reluctant to move, to break the circle of honesty we'd created. We should go, May said finally, standing and stretching. I have an early class tomorrow, but I'm with you all the way on this, Yui. Whatever you need. She hugged me tightly, then punched Daiki lightly on the shoulder. Take care of her, yeah? I'll text you both later about tomorrow's plan. After she departed, Daiki and I sat in silence for a moment. The temperature had dropped with the sun, and I pulled my jacket tighter around me. I'll walk you home, he offered, gathering his bag. We made our way slowly through the park, the paths emptying as closing time approached. When we reached the west exit, Daiki stopped. Yui, there's something else I need to say. His voice had taken on a quality I hadn't heard before, a nervousness that seemed uncharacteristic. This isn't the right time, and I know tomorrow is going to be difficult enough without complications, but he looked away, toward the city lights beginning to illuminate the Tokyo skyline. My feelings for you have grown beyond friendship, he said simply. I've felt this way for a while, but I never said anything because you were with Ren, and I'm not telling you now to pressure you or complicate things. I want to be honest with you, after all this deception you've had to deal with. The confession hung in the cool evening air between us. I didn't know how to respond. My emotional landscape was too churned up from 6 weeks of pretense and the pain that preceded it. I'm not asking for anything, he continued. Whatever decision you make about your future, I'll respect it. If friendship is all you want from me, that's enough. I reached for his hand, giving it a quick squeeze before letting go. Thank you for telling me. For being honest, I don't know what I feel right now, beyond this overwhelming need to end the charade. He nodded, understanding. One thing at a time. Will you be there tomorrow? I asked. Not part of the confrontation, just, I'll be there, he promised. At a distance, but there if you need me. We parted at the station, heading to our separate train lines. As I watched him disappear into the evening crowd, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Anxiety about tomorrow's confrontation, relief at finally being honest with someone, and a small, unexpected warmth at the knowledge of his feelings. Back in my apartment, I removed the photos of Ren and me from my desk drawer where I'd hidden them weeks ago, after pretending they held no memory for me. I studied his face in the images, the calculated smile, the arm always positioned to display his expensive watch, the eyes that never quite connected with the camera or with me. The charade had become more painful than the original betrayal. Living the lie had taught me more about myself than I'd ever wanted to know. My capacity for deception, my willingness to manipulate others for answers, my ability to compartmentalize my feelings. I didn't recognize the person I'd become in pursuit of the truth. Tomorrow at Sakura Bridge, it would end. All of it. The lies, the pretense, the relationship built on deception. I placed the photos back in the drawer, no longer interested in the false history they represented. I pulled out my phone and deleted the reminder for my fake physical therapy appointment. I wouldn't need that cover story anymore. For the first time in 6 weeks, I would face Ren as myself. Not as the amnesiac girlfriend he'd been constructing in his preferred image, but as the woman who remembered everything and had finally seen enough. I gripped the metal railing of Sakura Bridge, my fingers turning white as rain collected in small pools between my knuckles. The light drizzle had started 20 minutes ago, gradually soaking through my thin jacket. I didn't open my umbrella. Something about the cold droplets against my skin felt appropriate, a physical echo of that night 7 weeks ago when everything shattered. The exact spot where the accident happened was unremarkable. No memorial, no skid marks, nothing to indicate that a life had been altered here, just weathered concrete and the same view of cherry trees, now bare of blossoms, lining the water below. I positioned myself there deliberately, watching droplets ripple across the surface of the canal. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a message from May, in position at the north end, Daiki's at the south, say the word and we're there. I slid the phone back without responding. This confrontation needed to be mine alone, though knowing they were nearby gave me strength. Footsteps approached from behind, hurried, familiar. I didn't turn around. Yui! I got here as fast as I could. You're soaked. Why didn't you wait under the shelter? Ren's voice carried that practiced concern I'd come to recognize over the past weeks. Here, take my umbrella. I finally turned to face him. His hair was perfectly styled despite the rain, his expression a careful balance of worry and affection. The performance I'd watched evolve over 7 weeks of recovery. I wanted to feel it, I said quietly. The rain, like that night. Confusion flickered across his features. What night? Yui, are you having some kind of memory breakthrough? Is that why you wanted to meet here? I studied his face, memorizing the exact moment everything would change between us. I remember everything, Ren. I always did. The words hung in the rain-filled air. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then understanding, and finally, fear. What are you talking about? His voice rose slightly. Your accident. The doctors said I lied, I said simply. From the first moment I opened my eyes in that hospital bed and saw you sitting there, I lied about not remembering. He took a step back, his carefully constructed reality crumbling. But why would you? Because I saw the texts, Ren, that night. Your messages with Nana. I was running away from what I'd discovered when the accident happened. His face drained of color. For several seconds, he seemed incapable of speech. Then, like watching gears shift in a machine, I saw him recalibrate. Yui, listen. He reached for my hands, which I kept firmly on the railing. Whatever you think you saw, it wasn't what it looked like. Nana was just a mistake, a stupid mistake. I shook my head. 6 months isn't a mistake, it's a choice, a relationship running parallel to ours. The accident changed everything, he continued desperately, ignoring my words. When I thought I might lose you, I realized what was important. These past weeks, taking care of you, helping you remember, that was real. No, it wasn't. I finally released the railing, stepping away from him. You rewrote our entire relationship. You invented dates we never had, conversations that never happened. You edited out every argument, every disappointment. You created a perfect girlfriend who never existed. Rain streamed down his face now, his expensive jacket darkening with moisture. I was trying to protect you. Your recovery was delicate. You told Takashi and Kenji to lie for you if I ever asked where you were, I interrupted. You created group chats that excluded me where you coordinated your stories. For months before my accident. His expression hardened slightly. Who told you that? Daiki? He's always been jealous of what we have. What we have is nothing, Ren. I kept my voice level despite the anger churning inside me. What we had was built on your convenience and my ignorance. That's not fair. He ran his hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect arrangement. I made mistakes, yes, but I chose you. When you were in that hospital bed, I chose you. You chose the easier option, the one that wouldn't damage your reputation. I reached into my pocket, fingers closing around the small object I'd brought. You were on the phone with Nana the night I came home from the hospital. I heard you. She doesn't remember anything. I need more time. I'm handling it. His face contorted with frustration. You're twisting everything. I was trying to end things with her properly. I just needed time to... His phone rang, cutting through his protests. The distinctive ringtone, a classical piano piece, was one I'd heard multiple times over the past weeks whenever he stepped away to take work calls. We both stared at the pocket where his phone continued to play Chopin. Aren't you going to answer it? I asked quietly. Nana's waiting. He didn't move to retrieve the phone, letting it ring until silence returned. In that moment, all pretense fell away from his expression, leaving something cold and unfamiliar behind. So this whole time, your recovery, your progress, it was all an act? There was a new edge to his voice now. You manipulated me for weeks, made me take care of you, worry about you. Yes. I didn't flinch from the accusation. At first it was about revenge. I wanted to see how far you'd go, what stories you'd tell, but it became something else, something worse. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled the small velvet box from my pocket, the promise ring he'd given me last Christmas, which I'd removed the day after the accident, but continued to keep nearby as part of my charade. I became someone I didn't recognize, someone who could lie convincingly, day after day, someone who could watch you suffer with guilt and feel satisfaction. I placed the box on the bridge railing between us. I don't want to be that person anymore. Ren stared at the box, raindrops collecting on its surface. Yoi, please, we can start over, for real this time. No more lies, no more Nana. There's already a message from her on your phone, confirming your plans for tonight. I stepped away from the railing, from the ring, from him. 9 o'clock at Shinagawa Hotel, the usual room. His silence was confirmation enough. I don't hate you, Ren, that would be easier. Instead, I have to live with the knowledge that I loved someone who never really existed. I turned away, facing the direction I needed to go. Good luck with your thesis defense next month. I hear the economics department is impressed with your research. You're really ending this? After everything? His voice had taken on a desperate quality I'd never heard before. It ended 7 weeks ago on this bridge. We've just been acting out the epilogue. I walked away, not looking back even as he called my name once, twice, a third time with increasing volume. The rain continued to fall, washing away the last traces of the life I'd been clinging to. At the far end of the bridge, exactly where he said he'd be, Daiki stood beneath a dark blue umbrella. He didn't approach until I was nearly past him, respecting the space this moment required. "You okay?" he asked simply, falling into step beside me without presuming to shelter me with his umbrella. I considered the question more seriously than its common usage usually warranted. "No," I answered honestly, "but I will be." He nodded, accepting this without platitudes or reassurances. We walked in silence along the path that curved through Ueno Park, our footsteps synchronizing naturally despite the difference in our heights. The rain lightened to a fine mist, more breath than water against my skin. I expected to feel hollow, drained by the confrontation that had consumed my thoughts for weeks. Instead, I felt strangely buoyant, as if I'd set down a weight I'd been carrying for far longer than just 7 weeks. Perhaps the roots of this moment stretched back further than Ren's betrayal, or my deception. Back to the first compromise, the first overlooked lie, the first time I'd chosen comfortable fiction over uncomfortable truth. "My portfolio's due next week," I said finally, breaking our companionable silence. Daiki glanced at me, surprise evident in his expression, not at the information, but at my choice to mention it now. "Professor Okada extended the deadline, right?" he asked. I nodded. "I know exactly what I'm going to submit now, a series on memory, deception, and rebirth. The fractured reflection piece was just the beginning. Sounds powerful? It needs to be." I looked up at the darkening sky, allowing raindrops to touch my face. Art is the one place I never lied. Not to myself, not to anyone. We reached the station entrance too quickly. I wasn't ready to end this quiet journey, but the evening was advancing, and we each had our own paths forward. "Do you want company getting home?" Daiki asked, carefully neutral. "No," I said, softer than I intended. "But thank you, for everything, for seeing me when I was trying not to be seen." He smiled, that authentic expression that never felt performed or practiced. "That's the easy part. You're worth seeing, We parted there, no promises or expectations passing between us. Whatever might develop between us, friendship, something more, something different, would need clean soil to grow in, not the churned earth of recent deceptions. The train was nearly empty this late on a rainy Tuesday. I watched my reflection in the window, superimposed over the city lights blurring past. The woman looking back at me seemed both familiar and new, like a portrait I'd painted from memory that had somehow developed its own consciousness. When I reached my apartment, I moved through the rooms with deliberate purpose. The photos of Ren and me that I'd hidden away weeks ago came out of their drawer. I placed them in a box, along with movie ticket stubs, the dried corsage from a gallery opening, and other artifacts of our year together. Not destroyed, just removed from immediate view, a history acknowledged but no longer defining my present. In the kitchen, I found a slender vase for the wildflowers Daiki had brought to my studio yesterday. They weren't a grand gesture or a romantic overture, just simple blooms he'd thought I'd appreciate. I arranged them carefully by the window where morning light would reach them first. My easel stood in the corner, a blank canvas waiting. Tomorrow I would begin the final piece for my portfolio, something that captured this strange journey of pretended forgetting and actual remembering. Professor Okada had been right. My hands remembered what my mind created, regardless of what story I told the world. I didn't know what came next. Dating seemed impossible to contemplate just hours after ending my relationship. My friendship with Daiki needed space to find its true shape without the distorting pressure of recent events. My art required focus as the semester closed. For the first time since the accident, that uncertainty didn't feel frightening. The future stretched before me like a blank canvas, not empty with loss, but open with possibility. The rain tapped gently against my window, no longer the soundtrack to tragedy, but simply water nourishing whatever would grow next.